Hey, it's Meg Ellefson, host of the Drive North podcast. Super happy to have joining me this morning. Well, it's not even this morning. I'm still so used to saying that. It's the afternoon. Well, I don't know where it is. Wherever you're listening, it could be the morning, evening, or in between somewhere. But my friend Brian Reisinger, and we go back a ways to the days when I hosted a radio show in Wausau. But we've had some really good conversations centered around at times about his book growing up on a small family farm, and I would be remiss in not mentioning that he's an author of a book called Land Rich, Cash Poor, and then the subtitle My Family's Hope and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. He's award winning, so that's important to note as well. Rural policy expert who grew up on a family farm in Sauk County, Wisconsin. And I mean, I could go on and on. I want him to do all the talking today, but I will say this, our topic today, unusual, I guess. Well, and not really, because it's sort of made its way to the forefront of discussion, is AI. I once being a huge critic and just very suspicious of AI, and now of course I use all the AI tools whenever I can. I mean, and it's just another, in my opinion, sometimes it's just another way to Google something. It's just a different way. But how AI is affecting Wisconsin's rural workforce, and then also I want to dive into a little bit about what you think, Brian, about data centers and how that is going to impact all of us in Wisconsin and beyond. So, welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad you're doing this show after your years on the air.
Thank you. Well, so let's talk about, because I know you wrote a piece in the Milwaukee Journal, 5 ways to stop AI from getting or gutting, not gutting, or maybe getting and gutting rural Wisconsin's workforce. And I mean, I think that's something we need to be very concerned about, because we want to preserve, well, our rural parts of this country, rural parts of the state. And I mean, it's just, for all the time that I now spend up north in my new career, I love the North Woods. And, and I know you love the part of the state that you're from and want to preserve the great things about it. So, talk about how AI is affecting the rural community and the rural workforce, and then we can kind of dive into data centers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always love talking to Northwoods audiences because I always say to my friends up north that the Northwoods folks and the people in Southwest Wisconsin, Driftless Country, which is where I'm from, similar people, rural communities, hardworking people, people who look at places like Madison and Milwaukee and kind of, at best, give it a sideways look, maybe now and then a curse word, because it's a part of the state that is so easily forgotten. And there's places like that all across the country, right? So those of us who are from rural communities and think about rural communities, whatever we're doing in life, really need to be thinking about AI on a whole new level. And the reason I say that is people have been talking about how AI is going to steal white collar jobs and office workers, accountants, whatever it may be. And I think that is a real discussion we need to have. But the impact on the rural workforce and our rural communities is something that has not been understood. And I'll try to encapsulate it very briefly, and we can unpack any element of this that you want to, Meg. But here's what it comes down to. As AI moves from being that thing you can Google with more effectively and turns into being that thing where it's no longer a machine just giving you information that is based on how the human programmed it, but it's a machine learning on its own and applying that knowledge on its own. They call that AGI, artificial general intelligence. That's when that kind of the robots begin to have their own consciousness, if you're thinking about this in terms of a science fiction movie.
Creepy.
Yeah. As we move to that, there's immense capabilities that mankind can get from that. But there's also immense risks because, and I try not to listen to too many experts from one coast or the other, but I try to look at people who've looked at something honestly. There are some MIT researchers that did some really good, honest work about AI, where they tried to figure out how can we have pro-worker AI. What they said is when you move to AGI, what it means is these artificial intelligence agents can now get their arms around the entirety of human knowledge on the internet. That's what that allows them to do. So these robots, if you want to use that, way of thinking about it, are able to think for themselves, apply that knowledge themselves, and they get their arms around all of human knowledge. And so what that means is just like gasoline, diesel fuel, precious minerals, crops that we grow, any other product, any other important thing. Information is a product too. And that means that a few companies are going to be able to get their hands around and control all of human knowledge. And whenever we've had a whole lot of power get concentrated in the hands of a few, it has created all kinds of negative impacts. And what it does is it makes industries consolidate. So we've been losing farms at the rate of 45,000 a year, right? We've been losing jobs to automation and offshoring of jobs from the manufacturing sector for decades. All these things we've been losing, that's going to happen with information too. And it's not just going to be white collar workers. It's going to be people in the trades who depend on information around how to work on circuitry if you're an electrician. It's going to be farms that are already getting wiped out by all kinds of forces, suddenly finding that the technology that's available to them is only there for the great biggest farms, and it's on hyperdrive because AI has figured out how to, produce food more efficiently with all this technology, and we don't even need our farmers anymore, or at least we only need a couple of them. AI is going to take all these trends that have been wiping out our farms and wiping out our rural workforce and our manufacturing jobs, and it's going to put them on hyperdrive if we have AI only looking for ways that we can eliminate labor and increase productivity. So we got to figure out a way to not have it be about that. We can't have it be about AI eliminating labor. It's how can you make labor more effective so they can accomplish more for their companies, for their small businesses, but not how to eliminate, because AI is going to figure out how to eliminate all kinds of work. And what I found as I was studying this is it's not just those white collar workers, it's also a lot of parts of our rural workforce, from our farms to our manufacturing jobs to our trades.
So, who do you find is an ally for rural Wisconsin? I mean, I'm hoping you have the ear of our elected leaders, whether it's at the local level or all the way up to, I guess, the federal level. But um, and ultimately, um, it has to be those that are programming AI, right? I mean, we have to make sure that they make AI friendly or I don't know, sympathetic doesn't seem like the right word, but just to understand how valuable it is to have. I mean, to be able to I hesitate to say capitalize on the tools or the way in which AI simplifies and makes our jobs easier, but then also limit their ability to, as you were saying, take over aspects of, well, I guess any industry, any aspect of human life that we want to preserve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question as far as who the allies are. Look, I think that the folks who are out there developing this AI, I think there are good people and less good people in every single industry. And what you see out of the AI industry right now is folks that are saying, hey, what we're creating is going to be incredibly powerful. It's got massive opportunities, but it's also got big risks. And then the second thing they say is, but don't regulate us because we don't want to let China get to it before America. And I know you and many of your listeners probably are, rightfully so, skeptical of government regulation. So I'm not necessarily saying we need to have a whole bunch of government regulation here, but we do need to figure out what is okay and isn't okay for these AI companies. And I think some of those folks that are saying this, issuing those warnings, are genuine about it. Maybe some of them are trying to find a way to kind of inflate the importance of their product and make everyone worked up about it, attract investors, and also keep the government off their back. I'm not sure. We don't really know. It's too early to tell who are the good actors and who aren't. But the basic reality is we need to your exact point, get these decisions out of Silicon Valley and into the heartland. So whether that is some of the folks who are leading the way in AI, leaving Silicon Valley and actually working in and spending time in rural communities, or whether it is startup opportunities, startup businesses, companies finding new ways to use AI when they're already operating in rural areas. We need people who are grounded in what's going on in our rural communities. I'll use the farm thing as an example. So farms have been getting wiped out, for 100 years. We've been losing farms at the rate of 45,000 a year for the past 100 years, as I found in my book, Land Rich, Cash Poor. And there's economic and governmental reasons for that. There's also technological reasons. So with technology, we've had a lot of technology move American agriculture forward. But a lot of that technology has also been geared toward the biggest operators, where it doesn't work for the small and mid-sized farms as well as it does the large farms. So you got tractors that are pulling implements that have more and more and more field rows, or you got buildings that hold more and more animals. And that's good for the larger farms, and that's fine. But for the mid-sized and small farms, if you're not ready to add a couple hundred cows or a couple thousand acres or what have you, or you don't have the money to do that, what do you do with your current livestock and your current fields? You need to be able to make a living on that. And now you got this technology that's too expensive. You can't afford that next tractor. You can't afford that next piece of milking equipment if you're milking or whatever the case is. So if AI is used to put these trends in hyperdrive, say, hey, how do we produce more food with needing less people doing it? And that's what AI is set loose on doing. We're going to take all this whole issue of how all this technology has been leaving our farms behind for decades, and we're going to put that on hyperdrive. We're talking like Star Trek warp speed, like boom, it's gone. We're going to wipe out farms way faster. However, if we use AI to say, hey there, AI, if you get the chance to kind of like knock on the windshield and say hello, hey, AI, can you help us figure out a way to develop types of technology that can work for large farms and also for mid-sized and small farms? Technology that's practical on farms of all sizes and affordable for farms of all sizes. AI could help tackle that problem. And if we did that, we could actually save a whole lot of family farms. So I always tell people it's not exactly about for or against AI. It's about, are we using it in a way that actually connects with the challenges in the heartland and can help us solve problems? Or are we just going to make the current trends wiping out our rural workforce even worse? And farming is just one example.
Well, and so, I'm sure you've seen there's ChatGPT and Grok and Claude and Gemini. I know I'm missing another one, but do we need one called Ally, Ally AI, so that it's developed to work as a partner with, well, it will take as an example family farms, because I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking in my head, so what specifically is it that those who are offering AI as a whatever solution, what's their motivation? Is it, I mean, sadly, is it profits? Is that what, I mean, is that all what this is when they strive to reduce workforce? I mean, I know that, I mean, I know farmers here in central Wisconsin that, have struggled for years with finding good people to work for them. And I shouldn't even say good, just people to work for them. And so, I mean, I get that, and I think that that could be a potential for AI to be an ally or a partner, but not to, I mean, because if the goal is for AI to somehow take over family farms, I don't understand how anyone could be in favor of that unless there's some sort of, I mean, unless it's really as dirty as, oh, yep, we just want to make a profit.
The way it gets talked about, it kind of gets cloaked in this language of productivity. People who believe in a market economy want growth, and you need increasing productivity to do that, right? And so they talk like, oh, well, AI is going to make things much more productive and lower cost. Well, what they're talking about is they're talking about producing more and more with fewer and fewer people only. And we need it to be an element, right? Like some farms can't find the workers that they need. If there's a way that technology can fulfill a need that workers are not currently meeting, great. But if that technology is finding new ways, you just don't need new workers. You know what I mean? Like that's a problem, and it's taking it too far. And we need to think about productivity not just as producing more with less labor. We need to think about productivity as producing more. In some cases where we struggle to get labor, maybe we don't need that labor anymore. In other places where we have the labor, maybe it's finding ways for workers on farms, workers in factories to have technology that can help them accomplish more and have more skill sets. So how do we use AI to maybe help some of those places where you struggle to get labor? But not only that, how do we also use AI to improve the capabilities of the current workforce where you need those workers even more, and you can afford to pay those workers because your operation is growing. You're finding a way to accomplish more. You can have 10 people working for a small business, and you can use AI to eliminate 8 of them. Or you can say, how do I use AI to make those 10 workers capable of so much more so that this business can accomplish more for the same cost? So that's the way we look at it. I think we need to figure out a way to use AI to grow the pie in our rural farms and small businesses and other parts of our rural communities, as opposed to figuring out how to eliminate parts of it. We know how to eliminate parts of it. We've been doing that for decades, and we've been gutting our rural in small towns for decades as a result.
So does this issue, do you think, transcend political parties? I mean, are there people on both sides of the aisle that are in agreement with what you're saying and that want to see, want to preserve family farms or rural farms or, just
Yeah.
any industry that has been I guess, the lifeblood of the smaller communities throughout the state?
I think it really does. I think it really does transcend party. And when I publish my book, I mean, basically what we do there is we talk about the reasons that we've been wiping out farms for decades and the impact that has on everybody, from the price of your food to your health to everything. And we weave that with my family's story, 4 generations of survival on our farm. What I found is those issues and stories like that cut across party lines. I got Republicans saying we got to do something for our rural communities. I got blue collar Democrats or people who are from rural areas who are Democrats saying, hey, what can we do about this? They may not agree on the solutions, but there are people on both sides of the aisle who care about that issue. And I think it's true of our rural communities generally. So this isn't an endorsement for one party or another. It's just to say it really depends on the person and do they understand rural communities. In general, Republicans have been winning rural areas, and in many cases that's been for good reason because they've been speaking to concerns of rural communities more than Democrats have. In some areas, you got rural areas. I know this is true for Southwest Wisconsin. There's areas where people are stalwart voting for Republican, but if they thought there was a blue collar Democrat fighting for them, they don't have any party allegiance. It's about who's fighting for their community, And so I think that it's true that farm issues and issues of rural communities are things that should really transcend party. And this issue of is AI going to be pro-worker or not is something that everyone from every background should care about. And here's why. It's not just about the job that is eliminated, whether it's a white collar job, which might alarm some people, or whether it's a blue collar or rural job, which might alarm some other people. It's about the impact when that job gets eliminated. So let's continue with the farming one just because it allows people to see the kind of the through line. Let's say that AI puts the disappearance of farms on hyperdrive, like I warned about. If that happens, what happens? Well, we keep losing farms at an even faster rate than we already have, faster than 45,000 a year for the past century. And our food prices start going up more and more because we have a super vulnerable supply chain, food supply chain right now. We've got fewer and fewer farms, fewer and fewer businesses taking that food from the farm gate to the dinner table. So when you have one big distribution center go down, the price of food shoots up. That's why beef is really high right now because of the threat of the screwworm and other issues. That's why chicken and eggs were super high a year or two ago because of bird flu. That's why during COVID we saw all food more expensive because our whole supply chain was crashing down. So we have this really sensitive supply chain. And so if AI contributes to wiping out more farms, more family farms, it's going to ultimately contribute toward higher food prices, for instance. And this is true across manufacturing. This is true across the trades, whether it's electricians or whatever it is. If we don't find a way for AI to help enhance those jobs, and we instead only find ways for AI to remove those jobs, we're going to have big problems all across our economy, from our price of our food to the strength of communities all across the country, to our political divisions, because wiping out these rural communities is one of the reasons our country's become so divided. So it has big impacts for everybody if we let AI gut our rural workforce.
So again, back to allies. I mean, is there a group of, I hate to use the L word, but lobbyists that are minding this, I guess, AI influence, and are they powerful enough to, I guess, persuade the right people to protect the rural communities and those that would be adversely affected by, I don't know, like the evil, what do you call it, AGI? We don't, we want to be able to well, I feel like we have someone to count on to fight on behalf of those that perhaps don't have a voice.
Yeah, what I would say is that we're at very early stages. I know, Meg, you and I got to know each other from some of the work I do in public policy circles. And, there are a lot of good people fighting around a lot of issues. AI is so new that I think for the most part, the folks who are engaged in the public policy battles around this are probably the folks who are working for the AI companies. And again, I'm not saying all of those companies are bad and all of those companies are the people leading them are bad. I think it's a mix. I think we'll figure out who has mankind's interest at heart and who doesn't. And one of those measures is going to be do people want to learn about the impact on rural communities and the places where when you affect a job here, you affect something like the price of food across the country? Do they want to learn about that or don't they? It's very early stage in terms of figuring out who is organizing around these issues in terms of trying to help the emerge. And look, a lot of both of our political parties and our entire government system are sort of light years behind where AI is at. You know, the conversations they're having around how do we handle AI, what kind of policies do we need in place to make sure that we can find its potential realized, but also protect against some of its downsides. Most of the conversations you're seeing in the media, most of the conversations you're seeing in the halls of Congress, if you're seeing any, are like looking back on what was going on, trying to catch up with it, as opposed to talking about what AGI can accomplish, artificial general intelligence can accomplish, and how do we harness that for the good of our rural workers and the rest of our society versus how do we just let it wipe it out. I don't think those are conversations that enough people are having, to be honest.
Well, before we run out of time, I mean, we're just going to be able to touch on this, and this probably will have to expand in another conversation. But um, again, I heard well, AI was coming, and it's been a bit since that that entered, I guess, my consciousness, and really just um, I know I can think of maybe two or three legislators that I had conversations with in the Wisconsin legislature about AI and just being on top of it. And one of whom, Nate Gustafson, State Representative Nate Gustafson, he was one of the first, I think, in the state legislature to really, I don't want to say embrace AI, but at least embrace the topic that, to start the discussions. I think there's some kind of AI task force, actually. I think that's Speaker Voss assigned him to. But um, regardless, I'm just wondering what are we looking at in terms of, going, I guess, as a segue from AI to data centers. I mean, I have the same, um, well, it's because of who is who has been historically outspoken about progress, maybe, and I mean, I guess it always comes down to the divide is the political lines. But the data center issue, though, is a curious one. And initially, at least when I first started following it, there were a lot of, I would say, conservatives, independents that were very much in favor of the data centers. And and I don't think, and then came along this very vocal progressive crowd that was very opposed and bringing up concerns about water and harm, I guess, harm to humans and harm to the environment, etc. And so it's tough to take it's tough to know where to fall down on this one, on the data centers. I mean, and I think that there are a lot of parallels between the discussions of AI and data centers, and that for the most part, I don't think people are very well informed, or they don't have enough information to really know the specifics. And those that are in favor or those that are opposed are very dug in. And and I'm kind of, this is sort of like a rambling, it's not a diatribe, but I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you see in terms of the future of data centers? Because it seems as if every community that I've heard about, with the exception of perhaps, well, I think Port Washington was against them, but they've implemented a data center. What's going to happen with those, and how are we to allay the concerns of those that are speaking out about them and against them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And by the way, you've had people listening to you and loving what you have to say for years. So you get to have diatribes. That's why we're here, as far as I'm concerned. So, no, look, I mean, the data center issue, like you said with AI, there's some very clear kind of like for against kind of elements to it. And here's the reality. It is a messy picture. And are there data center projects that, if they're not properly designed, can really just take up space and rural land and use water resources and other things and not really have a benefit to the local community and only have benefit to the folks at Silicon Valley who aren't thinking about how to use AI back here, yeah, that is a scenario that exists. But also, are those data centers needed to allow America to move forward with innovating on AI quicker than its adversaries, such as China? Yeah, that scenario also exists, right? So for people who haven't necessarily connected the two, what the data center, part of what it's supposed to do is create that capacity for all of this AI. All that information has to run through somewhere, right? So that's where this data center thing gets connected in. And look, there are data center projects that can cause harm for communities if they aren't properly designed, and then you could design projects that can help communities. So you can be for or against data centers, but the reality is that the bigger question is also like, what do you think about AI and what we should be doing with it? And we can be unhappy with what we're doing with data centers or what we're doing with the AI that data centers power, and just sort of stop and put our heads in the sand completely. And we could stop the concerns, but if we do that, next thing you know, the Chinese Communist Party is leading the way worldwide on AI, right? So we can't really settle for the either or debate. We can't completely settle for that. And that doesn't mean I'm not saying that people who have concerns about current projects and things like that don't have merit. And I'm also not saying that they're completely right in every single case of every single data center. We have to figure out a way to have the data centers that power AI to be projects that are actually beneficial to local communities, meaning they're designed in a way that minimizes the impact on rural farmland and other, designed in a way that minimizes the impact on the water, etc. And they're designed in a way that maximizes the result for those local communities. So for example, what if we have companies that are building data centers to help power AI? Part of what they're doing is studying the way to use AI in rural communities to solve some of the problems that we've been talking about on this podcast. Can we have projects that allow AI to continue to flourish and keep that data center footprint as unintrusive as possible, while also creating resources and funding and attention on solving some of these issues so that AI can help our rural communities rather than gutting our rural workforce as it's destined to do now? So that's the kind of conversation I hope we can get to. I think you have to have the opposition out there and you have to have the support out there and to kind of like see the battle lines, so to speak. And now we need to transcend above that debate. And we need to not only ask, hey, are we putting a data center in the right place or not? But we have to ask, hey, is the industry that is doing AI focused on solving problems in rural communities or not? And if they are, well, then they can help us move into a brighter future where we can have a productive rural economy. And maybe they're going to be the kind of company that's going to try to make sure their data center project is properly situated for the local community. So I think if we have the folks developing AI understanding the heartland, that could actually help address the data center issue. And if not, we're going to kind of remain in this Chinese finger trap where it feels like one way or the other, and both directions feel bad to people,
Well, I certainly hope we have some leaders that will step up and, embrace this issue and see the importance of it. And I know it's good that you've put your voice out there, Brian. And I think, dare I use a cliche, but I I am inclined to believe that there's always a happy medium, and in between. And I guess I haven't seen anyone that's overtly data center, pro data center, that wants to just bulldoze the everything and put it in, and everyone else be damned. I haven't seen that point of view, but I'm trying to wrap my mind around why it is that there are those that are so opposed to it when, and if you think about it, I mean, I've always tried to call out hypocrisy when I see it over the years. And those that are opposed to data centers and really the progress of technology, they're using it to organize to oppose it. So it's kind of ironic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, look, you understand that there's value in viewpoints and try to figure out a way to have people able to stick to their principles and find solutions. So if you're focused on protecting our rural communities and you're worried about how facilities will impact the use of farmland or the use of our water, et cetera, that's an important, valuable viewpoint. If we're going to have AI be oriented around helping to enhance our rural workforce rather than wipe it out, and we're going to figure out how to have data centers be part of the AI picture, we need to be able to listen to the people who are opposed because they've found some issues and found some data in terms of the way that there's maybe some things people should be concerned about here. And we also need to listen to the folks who are saying, hey, we need to be competitive as a country to keep the Chinese Communist Party from surpassing us on the most powerful technology mankind has ever seen. And so the principles around that, protecting rural areas, stopping the Chinese Communist Party, those are important principles. I don't ever want people to feel like they can't have their principles. So let's have our principles and let's figure out how to have a discussion around orienting this industry in a way that doesn't have to gut rural America and doesn't have to plop data centers in all kinds of places that people don't want them and they only do harm. Let's find a better world than that. I think we can do that. But stare it straight in the face, the threat that AI could pose and the potential that AI could offer for our rural communities if we use it correctly. You know, in the column that led us to have this discussion, I told the story of my great aunt Helene. She left the farm in the 1940s and 50s, ended up working at the Oscar Mayer plant. She worked in manufacturing. She did all kinds of things. And she and her husband worked 2-3 jobs and all this stuff to try to provide a better living for their family. They ended up being able to move into the middle class. He ended up being part of the telecom industry. That's the rural workforce. These were farm kids who came in and figured out a way to work a couple jobs and make ends meet and ended up being part of the future of our economy. We can do that stuff again. We need to make sure that AI opens up opportunities like that, doesn't close them off and wipe them out. And so that's what I'm really hoping that we can do, not only in Wisconsin, but as a country, for the sake of all of our rural areas, Northwoods, Driftless, and everywhere in between.
Well, and I think that this gives us a great opportunity, in identifying that this isn't this issue does transcend political parties, and it's a way for us to come up with a bipartisan solution and work together to have the standards that we believe are necessary for both AI or AGI and data centers. And I mean, I always believe in having as many conversations as possible because that's how you and to talk with as many people as possible because that's how you become a more informed person. And that's, ultimately the objective of me even doing this podcast. It's not just to, blabber on. I mean, there's a point to it. And I think that I would like to see, I think about years ago, I was involved with a campaign in Minnesota. Norm Coleman, United States Senator Norm Coleman, and at the time he had been the mayor of St. Paul, and then decided to run for United States Senate. And his tagline in his campaign was "bringing people together to get things done." And interestingly enough, and I wasn't even really thinking about this, but Norm Coleman is a former Democrat. I mean, he was a Democrat mayor of St. Paul until the Democrat, or whatever they call themselves, the DFL in Minnesota, essentially ran him out of the party because he wasn't in lockstep with every single point in their political platform. And and that's kind of, I would characterize Norm Coleman as more independent minded anyway. But just the idea that he didn't want to really identify with a political party as much as he talked about bringing people together to get things done. And I'm hoping let's revive that idea, or at least embrace that idea with regard to this topic, and who knows how many others, and we can actually accomplish something, and instead of being so tribal about our politics, right?
I know some very, very conservative people, and I know some very, very liberal people who got strong principles. And when you get them talking about something other than the obvious political issues, they've got an issue that they agree on. It might be something to do with the way that drugs affect our communities. It might be any number of things where not every single issue is a nice, neat issue that fits into one box or another, right? And I think it's really important that people are able to have those conversations, and you can have your principles and you can be principled about it, but that doesn't mean, I think even the most stalwart folks, and many of whom I admire on, let's say folks that I know in conservative circles, some of those stalwart folks, that doesn't mean that they take every single thought they have dictated to them by the Republican Party on high, right? It's they've got their own views. I think a lot of people are more independent minded than we give them credit for. And so while I think we got a two-party system and there's always that battle going on, there's a lot of people who are dang conservative or dang liberal and are able to say, hey, you know what, on this issue over here, I think this, because this doesn't necessarily fit what the party's saying, or maybe I don't agree with what the party is saying, and you know what, I'm an independent person, I don't care. So there's opportunity, I think, for solutions amongst people who are very strong in their principles.
Brian Reisinger, award-winning author and rural policy expert. Also, I'm going to check this out. I would encourage listeners, viewers to also check out your TED Talk. I had no idea. That's cool. Man,
Yeah, that
that's
was a lot of fun. We talked about the threats to our food supply. So we talked about my family's story through the generations that we tell as raw and honest as we can in the book, and we talk about how that experience wove in with all the issues that are wiping out our farms and the threats it creates to our food supply. And I was grateful to have a chance to do that. That was a ton of fun.
and check out his book too, Land Rich, Cash Poor. Brian, thanks for joining me. This is just, oh, good. I'm so glad you have the book there. I should have one too.
Wouldn't be worth my salt if I didn't have one sitting, you know?
Well, I'm glad that we're able to connect and look forward to our next conversation. This is an ongoing topic, obviously, and anything else we want to discuss in the future too, you're always welcome back. So thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Meg. Appreciate you shedding light on these issues.